My name is Ramona Williams, and at 65 years old, I never imagined I would be standing in my own living room staring down a public notary who was about to help my daughter-in-law steal everything I had worked for. Just days after watching my only son Marcus marry this woman in what I thought was a beautiful ceremony, she walked through my front door with legal papers and a plan to ship me off to a nursing home. But here is the thing about underestimating a woman who has survived loss, hardship, and 65 years of life. I had a few surprises of my own waiting for her. Before I tell you exactly how I turned the tables on someone who thought an old woman would be easy prey, please let me know where you are watching from. And don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe, because what happens next is going to shock you just as much as it shocked them. Let me take you back to the beginning to help you understand how deeply this betrayal cut through my heart. The house where I was being threatened sits on Maple Street in a quiet neighborhood in Portland, Oregon. It is a beautiful 3-story Victorian that my late husband George and I purchased back in 1983 for $68,000. Over the years, we poured our hearts, souls, and every spare dollar into making it a true family home. George was a carpenter by trade, and during our 40 years of marriage, he transformed that house room by room. He built custom cabinets in the kitchen, installed hardwood floors throughout the entire first floor, and created the most magnificent built-in bookshelves you have ever seen in our living room. The crown molding the bay windows, even the wraparound porch. George crafted it all with his own 2 hands. When he passed away from lung cancer 2 years ago, I felt like I lost not only my soulmate, but also the person who had helped me create this sanctuary. The house today is worth approximately $850,000, something I learned when I had it appraised after George died. But its real value cannot be measured in dollars. This is where Marcus took his first steps, where we celebrated every birthday and Christmas, where George taught our son how to throw a baseball in the backyard, and where I nursed my husband through his final illness. Marcus grew up to be everything we hoped for in a son. He studied hard, went to college, and became a software engineer. At 32, he earns a good living at $85,000 a year, working for a tech company downtown. He has always been respectful, caring, and devoted to family. After his father died, Marcus made sure to visit me twice a week, calling daily to check on my well-being. 6 months ago, Marcus started dating Jessica through a dating app. She was 26 years old, claimed to work in marketing, and seemed absolutely charming during our first few meetings. Jessica had long blonde hair, bright green eyes, and a smile that could light up any room. She was petite, always impeccably dressed, and spoke with confidence about her career goals and future plans. During those early visits, Jessica would compliment everything about the house. She would run her hands along George's handcrafted banister and say things like, "Marcus is so lucky to have grown up in such a beautiful home," or, "This house has such incredible character and history." She asked thoughtful questions about our family traditions, wanted to hear stories about Marcus as a child, and seemed genuinely interested in becoming part of our family legacy. I remember one particular afternoon when Jessica spent 3 hours looking through photo albums with me. She listened intently as I shared memories of George building the garden shed, of Marcus learning to ride his bike on our driveway, and of the countless family barbecues we hosted in our backyard. She kept saying how much she valued family connections and how important it was to honor the previous generation. At the time, I thought her interest was sweet and genuine. Jessica also frequently mentioned her own family situation. She claimed to be estranged from her parents, saying they had never supported her dreams or treated her with respect. She painted herself as someone who had struggled to build a life on her own, working multiple jobs to pay for college and establish her marketing career. Marcus felt protective of her, and I admired what I believed was her determination to overcome difficult circumstances. The engagement happened quickly, just 4 months after they started dating. Marcus was absolutely smitten, and Jessica seemed equally devoted to him. She wore a modest engagement ring that Marcus had saved for months to purchase, and they planned a simple but elegant wedding ceremony for the following spring. Throughout the engagement period, Jessica became a regular presence in our home. She would join us for Sunday dinners, help me with holiday decorations, and even offered to assist with household tasks. She seemed to enjoy spending time in the kitchen, learning family recipes, and talking about future holiday traditions when she and Marcus would have children of their own. Looking back now, I can see the warning signs that I missed or chose to ignore at the time. The first red flag came during a visit to the bridal shop, where Jessica was selecting her wedding dress. We were having what I thought was a lovely mother-daughter conversation when she casually asked about my future living arrangements. "Ramona," she said while adjusting the veil in the mirror, "have you ever thought about downsizing now that George is gone? This house must be so much work for you to maintain all by yourself." The question caught me off guard, but I assumed she was simply concerned about my well-being. "Oh no, dear," I replied. "I could never leave this house. It holds too many precious memories, and besides, I am still quite capable of taking care of it." Jessica's reflection in the mirror showed a brief flash of something I could not quite identify, but she quickly smiled and said, "Of course I just worry about you sometimes. You should always feel free to rest more and let the younger generation handle the heavy responsibilities." A few weeks later, I discovered that Jessica had been researching local assisted living facilities and nursing homes on my computer. When I asked her about it, she explained that she was simply gathering information just in case something happened to my health. "I want to make sure we are prepared to give you the best care possible," she said with what seemed like genuine concern. Marcus supported her explanation, praising Jessica for being so thoughtful and forward-thinking about family matters. "She just wants to make sure you are protected, Mom," he told me. "Isn't it wonderful that she cares so much about your future?" Another troubling incident occurred during a family dinner when Jessica began discussing the local real estate market. She had apparently been researching property values in our neighborhood and mentioned how much houses like ours were selling for these days. "It is amazing how much equity you have built up in this place," she said. "You could live anywhere you wanted with that kind of money." When I expressed that I had no interest in selling, Jessica persisted. "But think about it, Ramona. You could buy a beautiful little condo somewhere with no maintenance worries and still have plenty left over for travel hobbies or anything else you wanted to do. Would not that kind of freedom be wonderful at this stage of your life?" Marcus joined the conversation, agreeing that it might be something worth considering. "Jessica has a point, Mum. You have been talking about wanting to see Ireland someday. Selling the house could make that possible." I firmly shut down the conversation, explaining that the house was not for sale and never would be while I was alive. Both Marcus and Jessica seemed disappointed, but they dropped the subject for the moment. The most disturbing discovery came just 2 weeks before the wedding. I happened to answer the landline when someone from Sunset Manor, a local nursing home, called, asking to schedule a tour for the Anderson family. When I explained that no one in our family had requested any information, the caller seemed confused. "We have a note here that Jessica Thompson called last month asking about availability and pricing for an elderly family member," the woman said. "She specifically asked about our memory care unit and mentioned that placement might be needed within the next 6 months. My blood ran cold as I processed this information. When I confronted Jessica about the call, she denied making any contact with Sunset Manor. "That is so strange," she said with a puzzled expression. "Maybe they mixed up the names. There are probably lots of Jessicas in Portland." Marcus believed her explanation, but I had serious doubts. The caller had specifically mentioned our family name and provided details that seemed too accurate to be a simple mistake. Despite these growing concerns, I kept my suspicions to myself. Marcus was happier than I had seen him since his father died, and I desperately wanted to believe that my fears were unfounded. The wedding was approaching quickly, and I convinced myself that post-wedding life would settle into a comfortable routine where Jessica would finally relax and show her true caring nature. The wedding ceremony took place on a beautiful Saturday afternoon in May at the Rose Garden in Washington Park. Marcus looked incredibly handsome in his charcoal grey suit, and Jessica was stunning in an elegant ivory dress with delicate lace sleeves. 150 guests attended, including relatives, friends, and colleagues from both families. I watched my son promise to love, honor, and cherish this woman, and my heart swelled with joy despite my lingering concerns. During the reception, Jessica seemed genuinely happy and affectionate toward both Marcus and me. She made a point of including me in photographs, thanked me repeatedly for welcoming her into the family, and spoke eloquently about looking forward to creating new memories in our family home. "Ramona has been like a second mother to me," Jessica announced during her maid of honor speech. "I feel so blessed to be joining a family with such strong values and traditions. Marcus and I cannot wait to build our future together, surrounded by all the love and history that this family represents." The guests smiled warmly at her words, and I felt a wave of relief wash over me. Maybe I had been wrong to doubt her intentions. Maybe the stress of wedding planning had caused me to misinterpret innocent comments and coincidental events. After the ceremony, Marcus and Jessica spent their wedding night at a luxury hotel downtown before leaving for a week-long honeymoon in Hawaii. During their absence, I enjoyed the quiet house and spent time reflecting on how blessed I was to have a new daughter-in-law who seemed to appreciate our family values. When the newlyweds returned from their honeymoon, they moved into my house temporarily while they searched for a place of their own. "We just need a few weeks to find the perfect house," Marcus explained. "The rental market is crazy right now, and we want to take our time finding something special." I was happy to have them both close by, especially since the house felt less lonely with their presence. Jessica seemed to settle in comfortably, rearranging some of the guest bedroom furniture and adding little touches that made the space feel more like home for the couple. For the first few days, everything seemed wonderful. We established new household routines, shared cooking responsibilities, and enjoyed evening conversations about their honeymoon adventures and future plans. Jessica appeared to be making genuine efforts to bond with me, asking for advice on everything from career decisions to holiday menu planning. However, by the end of their first week back, subtle changes began to emerge in Jessica's behavior. She started expressing opinions about how various rooms in the house should be organized differently. She suggested that some of my furniture was outdated and could be donated to make space for more modern pieces. She also began inviting friends over without asking my permission, first treating the house as if it were her own domain. When I gently mentioned that I preferred to be asked before guests were invited, Jessica responded with slight irritation. "Oh, Ramona, I did not realize I needed permission to have friends over. Marcus and I are family now, and this is our home too while we are staying here." Marcus supported his wife, suggesting that I was being unnecessarily formal with someone who was now part of our family. "She is not a guest anymore, Mom," he said. "Jessica should feel completely comfortable here." 3 days into their second week, living in my house, everything changed in the most shocking and devastating way imaginable. It was a Wednesday afternoon when Jessica arrived home from what she claimed was a job interview. But instead of appearing hopeful or excited about potential employment, she walked through my front door with a stern-looking man carrying a leather briefcase. "Ramona," Jessica announced without any preamble. "This is Harold Brennan from Brennan Notary Services. We need to discuss your living situation and some important legal documents that require your signature." I was sitting in my favorite armchair in the living room, reading a mystery novel and enjoying a cup of afternoon tea. The sudden formality in Jessica's voice and the presence of this stranger immediately put me on high alert. Marcus was not home from work yet, and I felt vulnerable being alone with these two people who were clearly operating with some predetermined agenda. Harold Brennan appeared to be in his late 50s, with thinning grey hair and wire-rimmed glasses that gave him an official business-like appearance. He wore a navy blue suit and carried himself with the kind of authority that suggested he had performed this type of task many times before. When he spoke, his voice was measured and professional, but there was something cold and unsympathetic in his tone. "Mrs. Williams," he began, setting his briefcase on my coffee table and opening it to reveal numerous legal documents. "I understand that your family has been concerned about your ability to continue living independently in this large house. These documents will ensure that you receive the appropriate level of care while also protecting your assets for future generations." Jessica positioned herself on the couch across from me, and I noticed that she was wearing an outfit I had never seen before, a crisp business suit that made her look older and more authoritative than usual. Her entire demeanor had shifted from the sweet, caring daughter-in-law I thought I knew to someone who seemed calculating and determined. "What kind of documents are you talking about?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly as I began to understand that this was not a friendly visit or helpful consultation. Harold pulled out a thick stack of papers and began spreading them across the table. "These are several important legal instruments," he explained. "First, we have a power of attorney document that would allow your son and daughter-in-law to make financial and medical decisions on your behalf. Second, there is a property transfer agreement that would ensure your house is properly managed and maintained. And finally, we have admission paperwork for Sunset Manor, which has been selected as the facility that can best meet your current health and safety needs." My heart began pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. "I never asked for any of this," I said, looking directly at Jessica. "I have not requested help with financial decisions, and I certainly have not agreed to move to any kind of care facility." Jessica leaned forward with what I now recognize was a predatory smile. "Ramona, we know this is difficult to accept, but Marcus and I have been discussing your situation extensively. You are 65 years old. You live alone in a house that is far too large for you to maintain safely, and frankly, your memory has not been as sharp lately as it used to be." "My memory is perfectly fine," I protested, but Jessica continued as if I had not spoken. "Just last week you forgot that you had invited us to dinner and had not prepared any food," she said. "And Marcus told me that you called him 3 times in one day, asking the same question about your property tax bill. These are early signs of cognitive decline, and the responsible thing to do is to ensure you have professional care before something dangerous happens." I knew immediately that Jessica was lying. The dinner incident she mentioned had never occurred, and I had definitely not made multiple calls to Marcus about any tax bills, but her confident delivery and the presence of the notary made me realize that she had been planning this moment carefully, probably for weeks or even months. Harold Brennan nodded sympathetically as Jessica spoke. "Mrs. Williams, I know this seems overwhelming, but your family is trying to act in your best interests. Sunset Manor is a beautiful facility with excellent care standards. You would have your own private room 3 meals a day, recreational activities, and round-the-clock medical supervision. Many seniors find that kind of supported environment much more comfortable than struggling to maintain a household independently. The monthly cost is $4,500, Jessica added, which can easily be covered by renting out your house or eventually selling it to cover long-term care expenses. Marcus and I are prepared to handle all the property management details, so you would not have to worry about anything." As the full scope of their plan became clear, I felt a wave of shock and betrayal that was unlike anything I had ever experienced. My own son's wife, the woman I had welcomed into my family and home, was sitting in my living room with a stranger calmly discussing how to strip away my independence, my home, and my financial autonomy. "Where is Marcus?" I asked. "Does he know about this meeting?" "Of course he knows," Jessica replied smoothly. "Who do you think contacted the notary and arranged for all these documents to be prepared? Marcus is at work right now, but he will be home soon to help explain why this is the best decision for everyone involved." Harold began pointing to signature lines on various documents, explaining what each paper would accomplish once I signed them. The power of attorney would give Marcus and Jessica complete control over my bank account's investment portfolio and all financial decisions. The property transfer would essentially deed my house to Marcus, while allowing them to make decisions about my living arrangements. The nursing home admission forms would commit me to immediate placement at Sunset Manor, with the first month's payment due within 7 days. "This is insane," I said, my voice growing stronger as the initial shock began to transform into anger. "I am a healthy, competent adult, and I am not signing anything. I want both of you to leave my house immediately." Jessica's mask of concern slipped slightly, revealing a flash of irritation that told me everything I needed to know about her true feelings toward me. "Ramona, you are not thinking clearly about this situation. We are trying to help you transition to a safer, more appropriate living arrangement before you have a medical emergency or accident that forces this decision to be made by strangers. The legal documents are all properly prepared, Harold added. Your signature today would simply formalize arrangements that are in your own best interests and will happen eventually, regardless of your current preferences. In that moment, as I looked at these two people, who were so confidently discussing my future, as if I had no say in the matter, something shifted inside me. The initial shock and hurt began crystallizing into a cold, clear determination that surprised even me. They had underestimated me completely, assuming that a 65-year-old widow would be too confused, intimidated, or helpless to fight back against their carefully planned scheme. I stood up slowly from my armchair, walked over to the telephone on the side table, and began dialing 911. Both Jessica and Harold looked startled by my sudden movement and the decisive nature of my actions. "What are you doing?" Jessica demanded, her voice sharp with alarm. "I am calling the police," I said calmly, "because I believe what you are attempting to do constitutes elder abuse and possibly fraud. I want officers here to witness this conversation and examine these documents before anyone signs anything." Harold immediately began gathering his papers back into his briefcase. "Mrs. Williams, there is no need to involve law enforcement in what is simply a family discussion about care planning. Perhaps we should reschedule this conversation for when your son can be present to mediate." But I had already connected with the emergency operator. "Hello, this is Ramona Williams at 1247 Maple Street. I need police officers to come to my home immediately. Two people are in my house trying to force me to sign legal documents that would put me in a nursing home and transfer my property against my will. I believe this constitutes attempted elder abuse, and I need assistance." Jessica jumped up from the couch, her face flushed with anger and panic. "You are making a huge mistake, Ramona. We are trying to help you, and now you are going to embarrass Marcus and create problems for your own family. My family would not try to steal my house and ship me off to a nursing home," I replied, still holding the phone. "And if Marcus is part of this plan, then I need to know exactly what he has been told and what he believes is happening here." The 911 operator assured me that officers were on their way and advised me to remain on the line until they arrived. Harold was frantically stuffing documents into his briefcase, while Jessica paced around my living room like a caged animal. "The police are going to want to see identification from both of you," I told them, "and they are going to want to understand exactly what authority you believe you have to be in my home with those papers." While we waited for the police to arrive, I used those few minutes to think clearly about everything that had happened over the past several months. Jessica's interest in the house, value her research into nursing homes, the mysterious phone call from Sunset Manor, and her increasing suggestions that I needed help managing my life all formed a clear pattern of manipulation and deception. I also realized that Marcus must have been gradually convinced that I was becoming incompetent or unsafe living alone. Jessica had probably been feeding him subtle suggestions and fabricated examples of my supposed memory problems or poor judgment. My son, who loved me and wanted to protect me, had likely been manipulated into believing that moving me to a care facility was a loving, necessary action. When the police arrived, I felt a tremendous sense of relief and vindication. Two officers, Sergeant Martinez and Officer Thompson, listened carefully as I explained the situation. They examined the documents that Harold had brought, took photographs of everything, and asked detailed questions about the circumstances that had led to this meeting. Harold provided his identification and business license, confirming that he was indeed a legitimate notary public. However, when the officers questioned him about the specific arrangements for this appointment, his story began to fall apart. He admitted that Jessica had contacted him, paid his fee in advance, and instructed him to bring pre-filled documents for my signature. Jessica's story was even more problematic. When asked about her legal authority to make care decisions for me, she could not provide any documentation of guardianship, medical power of attorney, or court-ordered conservatorship. The officers explained that without such legal authority, her attempt to place me in a care facility against my will could constitute unlawful imprisonment or kidnapping under Oregon state law. After the police finished their investigation, and Harold left my property with a warning about the legal implications of participating in elder abuse schemes, I was alone with Jessica for the first time since this nightmare had begun. The mask of caring daughter-in-law had completely disappeared, replaced by someone I barely recognized. "You have no idea what you just did," she said, her voice filled with venom. "Marcus is going to be furious when he finds out you called the police on his wife. You have probably destroyed any chance of having a relationship with your son or any future grandchildren." If Marcus is angry that I protected myself from someone trying to steal my home and my freedom, I replied, then I need to reevaluate what kind of relationship we actually have. Jessica began gathering her belongings, which I now noticed included several items from my house that she had apparently been planning to take with her. Among them was my late husband's watch, a silver picture frame that had belonged to my mother, and a small jewelry box that contained my wedding ring and other sentimental pieces. "Those items belong to me," I said firmly. "Please put them back where you found them. These are family heirlooms that should be preserved properly," Jessica responded. "You probably would not even notice if they were missing." I took out my phone and began taking photographs of Jessica holding my possessions. "The police officers gave me their card numbers," I told her. "I can have them back here in 5 minutes if you prefer to discuss this theft with them instead of with me." Realizing that she had lost all leverage in this situation, Jessica angrily returned my belongings and headed toward the door. Before leaving, she turned back to deliver one final threat. "You think you won something today, but you have no idea what Marcus and I have planned. We are not going anywhere, and neither are you until we get what we deserve from this family." After she left, I sat in my living room surrounded by the scattered remnants of their legal documents and tried to process what had just happened. My daughter-in-law, the woman I had welcomed into my family and home, had just attempted to have me declared incompetent and steal my house while arranging for my imprisonment in a nursing home I had never even seen. But there was something else troubling me even more deeply than Jessica's betrayal. Where was Marcus during all of this? Had he really known about and approved of this plan, or had he been deceived just as I had been? The Jessica I thought I knew could never have conceived and executed such a calculated scheme on her own. I spent the rest of that afternoon making phone calls and conducting research that I should have done months earlier. I contacted a private investigator named David Sullivan, who specialized in background checks and fraud investigation. I also called my attorney, Patricia Henderson, to discuss legal protections for my property and financial assets. David Sullivan agreed to meet with me the next morning to begin investigating Jessica's background, employment history, and financial situation. Patricia Henderson advised me to immediately change all my passwords, review my bank and investment accounts for any unauthorized activity, and consider placing additional legal protections on my property deed. That evening, when Marcus came home from work, I was waiting for him in the living room with a cup of tea and a heavy heart. I needed to understand exactly what he knew about Jessica's plan and whether my own son had been actively participating in a scheme to defraud me. Marcus walked through the front door that evening, looking tired from a long day at work. But when he saw my expression, his demeanor immediately shifted to concern and confusion. "Mom, Jessica told me you had some kind of episode today and called the police," he said, sitting down across from me. "She said you became paranoid and accused her of trying to hurt you. Are you feeling okay? Maybe we should make an appointment with your doctor tomorrow to make sure everything is all right." In that moment, I realized the full extent of Jessica's manipulation. She had not only attempted to steal my home and freedom, but she was now gaslighting both Marcus and me by portraying her criminal behavior as evidence of my mental instability. "Marcus," I said carefully, "I need you to listen to what actually happened today, and I need you to tell me exactly what Jessica has been saying about my health and mental state." Over the next hour, I walked my son through every detail of the afternoon's events. I showed him the photographs I had taken of the legal documents, the police report number I had been given, and the contact information for the officers who had responded to my call. As I spoke, I watched Marcus's expression change from skepticism to confusion to growing alarm. When I described the specific documents that Harold had brought and Jessica's statements about having my memory problems and incompetence, Marcus became visibly upset. "Mom, I never told Jessica that you were having memory problems," he said. "And I definitely never agreed to put you in a nursing home or transfer your house to anyone. When she mentioned that you might need help someday, I thought she was just being thoughtful about future planning." I then asked Marcus to tell me about all the conversations he had had with Jessica regarding my living situation and mental health. What emerged was a disturbing pattern of lies and manipulation that had been building for months. Jessica had been telling Marcus that I had been calling her during the day, confused and repeating the same questions multiple times. She claimed that I had been leaving the stove on, forgetting to lock doors, and having difficulty managing my medications. She had even told him that I had asked her to help me research nursing homes because I was afraid of having an accident while living alone. None of these things had ever happened. I had never called Jessica during the day, never left any appliances on, and certainly never asked for help finding a care facility. Every single example that Jessica had used to convince Marcus of my declining abilities had been completely fabricated. "She seemed so concerned about you," Marcus said, his voice filled with hurt and confusion. "She kept saying that she loved you like her own mother and just wanted to make sure you were safe and protected. I thought I was lucky to marry someone who cared so much about family." I could see that Marcus was beginning to understand the scope of Jessica's deception, but I needed him to know everything before I revealed what I had learned from my private investigator research. "Marcus, I need to ask you some direct questions, and I need completely honest answers," I said. "Did you ever sign any legal documents giving Jessica power of attorney over my affairs? Did you authorize her to contact nursing homes on my behalf? And did you know that she was meeting with a notary today to have papers prepared for my signature?" Marcus looked genuinely shocked by each of these questions. "No, Mom, absolutely not. I never signed anything, and I had no idea she was meeting with anyone today. When I left for work this morning, Jessica said she was going job hunting and might be late getting home." The final piece of the puzzle fell into place when I asked Marcus about Jessica's employment and financial situation. It turned out that she had been unemployed for the entire 6 months they had been dating, living off credit cards and borrowing money from Marcus to pay her rent and expenses. She had no marketing job, no steady income, and no assets of her own. "She told me she was between positions and interviewing for better opportunities," Marcus explained. "I have been helping her out financially because I thought it was temporary and I wanted to support her career goals." By the time we finished talking that evening, Marcus understood that he had been systematically lied to and manipulated by someone who had targeted our family specifically for financial exploitation. The woman he had married was not the person he thought he knew, and the marriage itself had been built on deception and criminal intent. The next morning, I met with David Sullivan, the private investigator who had already begun conducting preliminary research into Jessica's background. What he discovered was even worse than I had imagined. Jessica's real name was Jennifer Marsh, and she was 34 years old, not 26 as she had claimed. She had a criminal record that included 2 previous convictions for elder fraud in California and Arizona. In both cases, she had targeted widowed or divorced older adults, gaining their trust through romantic relationships with their adult children, or by posing as a caring caregiver. Her most recent conviction had been in 2018 in Phoenix, where she had married a retired teacher's son and attempted to have the 72-year-old father declared incompetent so she could gain control of his pension and home equity. That scheme had been discovered when the father's sister became suspicious and hired legal representation. Jennifer had served 18 months in prison and been ordered to pay restitution to her victim. After her release, she had moved to Portland and assumed the identity Jessica Thompson using falsified documents to create a new background and employment history. David also discovered that Jennifer had been researching my family for several months before she ever contacted Marcus through the dating app. She had accessed public records to learn about our home value, George's death, and Marcus's employment and income information. Her approach to my son had been calculated and purposeful from the very beginning. The most shocking revelation was that Jennifer was already married to another man in California. Her marriage to Marcus was completely invalid, making her guilty of bigamy, in addition to fraud and identity theft. Armed with this information, I contacted the police detective who had been assigned to investigate the previous day's incident. Detective Rebecca Torres was experienced in elder abuse cases and immediately recognized the seriousness of the evidence we had uncovered. "Mrs. Williams," Detective Torres said after reviewing David's report, "what you have experienced is part of a sophisticated criminal operation. Jennifer Marsh is a repeat offender who specifically targets families like yours. We need to arrest her immediately before she has a chance to disappear or destroy evidence." That afternoon, while Marcus was at work and Jennifer believed everything was proceeding according to her plan, police officers arrived at my house with a warrant for her arrest. I had been asked to be present during the arrest to provide any additional information that might be needed. When Jennifer answered the door expecting to see me alone and vulnerable, she instead found herself face to face with Detective Torres and two uniformed officers. The confident, manipulative woman who had threatened me the day before immediately began crying and claiming that there had been a misunderstanding. "I was only trying to help," she sobbed, as handcuffs were placed on her wrists. "Ramona asked me to research care options because she was scared about living alone. I never intended to hurt anyone or take anything that did not belong to me, but the evidence against her was overwhelming." Police had found forged identification documents in her possession, along with research files on several other elderly Portland residents who appeared to be potential future targets. Her laptop computer contained detailed financial profiles of multiple families, including specific information about property values, inheritance assets, and family relationships. During the search of her belongings, officers also discovered jewelry and personal items that she had stolen from my house over the previous months. Among them was my mother's pearl necklace, my husband's coin collection, and several valuable antique pieces that I had not even realized were missing. Jennifer was charged with elder abuse, fraud, identity theft, bigamy, and multiple counts of theft. The district attorney's office indicated that with her prior criminal history, she was facing a potential sentence of 5 to 8 years in prison. The legal proceedings that followed stretched over several months, during which Marcus and I worked together to rebuild our relationship and process the emotional trauma of Jennifer's betrayal. My son was devastated to learn that his marriage had been built on lies and criminal intent, but he was also grateful that I had been strong enough to protect our family from someone who could have destroyed everything we had worked for. Marcus moved back into my house temporarily while the legal case proceeded and while he worked through his feelings about the failed relationship. We attended family counseling together to address the trust issues and communication problems that had allowed Jennifer to manipulate both of us so effectively. During this time, I also learned more about how Jennifer's scheme was supposed to unfold after I had been placed in the nursing home. Her plan was to convince Marcus that maintaining my house was too expensive and emotionally difficult, leading to a quick sale of the property. She had already identified a real estate investor who would purchase the house at below market value for cash, allowing her and Marcus to split the proceeds and relocate to another state. Once they had access to my money, and I was isolated in the care facility, Jennifer intended to gradually drain my accounts through various medical and care-related expenses. Eventually, when my resources were exhausted, she would have convinced Marcus to abandon me entirely and start fresh somewhere else with their shared assets. The realization of how close I had come to losing everything, including my relationship with my son, was both terrifying and infuriating. But it also filled me with pride that I had trusted my instincts, stood up for myself, and refused to be intimidated by people who believed an older woman would be an easy target. Marcus learned valuable lessons about recognizing manipulation and the importance of verifying information rather than accepting claims at face value. He also gained a deeper appreciation for my strength and independence, which he admitted he had sometimes taken for granted before this experience. During Jennifer's trial, Both Marcus and I testified about her deception and the impact her crimes had on our family. The prosecutor presented evidence of her elaborate planning, her history of similar crimes, and the sophisticated nature of her identity theft and fraud operations. Jennifer eventually accepted a plea agreement that resulted in a sentence of 6 years in prison, followed by 3 years of supervised probation. She was ordered to pay restitution for all stolen items and legal expenses, though given her lack of assets, recovery of those funds was unlikely. The bigamy charges resulted in the automatic annulment of her marriage to Marcus, freeing him from any legal connection to someone who had never been legally entitled to marry him in the first place. Now, almost a year after Jennifer's arrest and conviction, my life has returned to a peaceful and secure routine. I still live in my beloved family home, which has been protected with additional legal safeguards that make it virtually impossible for anyone to manipulate or steal in the future. Marcus has slowly rebuilt his confidence and trust in relationships. He is currently dating Amanda, a wonderful elementary school teacher who shares his values and genuine appreciation for family connections. Amanda has been respectful and patient with both of us as we navigate the aftermath of Jennifer's betrayal. Unlike Jennifer, Amanda has never shown any interest in my financial situation or property value. She loves visiting our house because she enjoys hearing family stories and learning about the history that George and I created here over 4 decades. When she looks at George's handcrafted woodwork or my garden, she sees beauty and legacy rather than dollar signs. Marcus and Amanda are planning to marry next year, and this time I feel completely confident that he has chosen a partner who values him for who he is rather than what he might inherit. Amanda has already expressed her hope that I will continue living in my home for many years to come, and she looks forward to learning our family traditions and creating new memories in this house. The experience with Jennifer taught me important lessons about protecting myself and recognizing warning signs of manipulation. I now understand that criminals who target older adults are often sophisticated, patient, and skilled at building trust before revealing their true intentions. I have also learned that asking for help from professionals, whether attorneys, investigators, or law enforcement, is not a sign of weakness, but rather a smart strategy for protecting what matters most. The small expense of hiring David Sullivan to investigate Jennifer's background saved me from losses that could have totaled hundreds of thousands of dollars. Perhaps most importantly, I learned that standing up for myself, even when it felt frightening and uncertain, was the right choice. Jennifer and her accomplices were counting on my isolation, politeness, and reluctance to cause family conflict. When I refused to be intimidated and called for help instead, their entire scheme collapsed. Looking back on that terrifying afternoon, when Jennifer walked into my living room with legal documents and a notary, I am grateful that I trusted my instincts and refused to sign papers I did not understand. The courage to dial 911 and demand police protection changed everything and ultimately saved my home, my independence, and my relationship with Marcus. Today, I share my story with other older adults and their families as a warning about these types of sophisticated scams. Elder fraud is a growing problem that destroys families and devastates victims who often blame themselves for being deceived by people they trusted. But I want people to know that we are not helpless, and we do not have to accept abuse or manipulation from anyone, even family members, who claim to be acting in our best interests. We have rights, resources, and the ability to fight back when someone tries to take advantage of our age or supposed vulnerability. What happened to me could happen to anyone, regardless of education, income, or family support. The key is recognizing that legitimate family conversations about future care planning do not involve surprise visits from notaries, pressure to sign documents immediately, or threats about what will happen if we refuse to cooperate. If something feels wrong, it probably is wrong. And if someone is trying to rush us into major life decisions without giving us time to think, consult with trusted advisors, or seek independent legal advice, then we need to step back and demand answers to hard questions. The peace I have found is not just in knowing that Jennifer can no longer hurt me or my family, but in understanding my own strength and resilience. At 65 years old, I discovered that I could protect myself, fight for what mattered to me, and create the kind of future I wanted, rather than accepting whatever someone else had planned for me. I encourage anyone who is facing similar pressure or manipulation to remember that age does not make us helpless, and love does not require us to surrender our independence or decision-making authority to other people. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do for our families is to protect ourselves and our assets from those who would exploit our trust and generosity. Have you ever had to stand up to family members who were trying to take advantage of you? Have you seen warning signs of elder abuse or manipulation in your own community? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. Please like this video if my story resonated with you, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories about finding strength and courage when it matters most. Share this video with anyone who might benefit from learning about these tactics and how to protect themselves. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that you are never too old to fight for what is rightfully yours and to demand the respect you deserve.